session 6 on navigating the fieldwork, focus group discussion and interview. So without further, I don't have any other thing to add on this. And Dr. Subudi also would like to be a bit early, right? A bit early. So maybe you can just start, to save time.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Kim-san, and hello again, everyone. Good to see you, and thanks for coming. Let me just pull out my PowerPoint slide. Okay. Can you see this PowerPoint slide? Can someone confirm?
Yes. Can you
Yeah.
do the full screen, please?
Okay. I'm just trying to do that now. How's this?
All good,
Yeah,
DB.
perfect.
Okay. Thank you again. And I think this is our 6th online session. So we have 2 more to go after this week's session. And today, as you can see the title on this slide, I'm going to talk about different issues when we do the field work, or actually when we design research program, how we are actually going to deal with the question of power, identity, and how to ensure that the research is inclusive. As such, the title for this week, when I was actually writing the curriculum, I actually put the title in a bit of a narrow sense, because this was navigating the field work through focus group discussions and interviews. But as you see on the slide, there are actually issues that are more important than just doing interviews and field work. So what I decided is just to rephrase the title of this week's session a little bit, but not deviating too much what we originally wanted to do. So the new title for this week is Navigating Power, Identity, and Inclusivity in the Research. So the whole idea here is I'm not just going to focus on interview or focus group discussions, but talking about these issues and how they are, why they are important, how they are relevant, and what are the significances in the, in terms of designing a research project. So basically, I have 3 objectives, learning objectives in mind, which is pretty simple and straightforward as such, because I expect that by end of this online session, everyone will be able to recognize and, in fact, be able to reflect on the roles of the researcher's positionality and how that actually can influence the research. The other objective is that by end of this online session, you will be able to identify and reflect on what is power, how does power dynamics actually influence the relationship between researchers and research subject. And most importantly, because there is an overall focus, in designing this training curriculum, we had this inclusive research always in mind. So I want to spend some time in explaining, clarifying what do we mean by inclusive research, and what should be the priorities for inclusive research, why does it matter, and how we can ensure research becomes inclusive in different stages of research. For example, from design stage, implementation stage, through to report writing, data analysis, and report writing stage. to begin with, I want to ask people just two simple questions. And also you can take it as a way of icebreaker or brainstorming, in other words. As always, when I would ask you to engage in a discussions or do a brainstorm, please feel free to write what you think, your response in a chat box, and Muani will help me to read that your responses, and we can have a discussions around them. So the two simple questions I have for these sessions is, in your view, should we really need to pay attention to the question of power, identity, and inclusion in a research? That's my first question. Let me stick to the first questions and see what people think. Just you can just simply say yes or no. Let's see what people have to say about it. Yeah, there's yeah, the response coming on. There are two responses, and you have said yes, which I definitely agree. But does anyone have to say no about this question? You don't have to give me the justification as of yet. You feel free to say no if you think we don't really need to be worried about it, and I'll explain why. I'll leave that why question to me to clarify to you. Okay, someone says 50-50. I like that. Maybe that helps us to engage in further discussions about it. I just need to take one or two more. I'm just curious if anyone has to say no. But 50-50 response is interesting, and that's probably we can pick up. So look, there is a sort of a as I can see, there is a sort of a consensus in the room that we really need to pay attention to the question of power, identity, and inclusion. And of course, I totally agree with you. But but what I really want to focus on today is why and how. This is what we are going to focus on. Okay. Likewise, I also have another related second question for everyone to think very quickly. Okay, if we have to think about this question of power, identity, and inclusion, should we do this in relation to qualitative research, or can we also think of this in a quantitative research? You don't have to say yes or no. But what's people's view about? So how do we need to pay attention to this in quantitative research or qualitative research, or maybe both? Any quick response? Both, yeah. There's okay, it's a good point. All right, so look, I think we are on the same page in terms of the yeah, there's a couple of more responses coming in, which is again both. That's good. Right, yeah. And the reason why I ask this question is sometimes people tend to think that these question of power, identity, inclusion, these are mostly relevant to qualitative research field work, and we can actually do away without paying attention to these questions too much in the research design and implementation stage. And I'm actually going to argue against that. And in one of my slides, I'm going to explain you that why these issues matter for both qualitative research, but also quantitative research, why and how. This is one of the favorite quotes, and also I think one of the well-cited work in relation to researchers' identity and research field work. Kamala Biswasaran's work published in 1994. You will find a reference citation for this works at the end of the slide, where she argues that the fieldwork field workers' identity. And this, and you can actually notice the terminology used here, field workers' identity. So it could be researchers, associate researchers, or anyone working in a research project and is engaged in field work. So the field workers' identity, whether that's relating to gender, race, class, nationality, inevitably shapes the research encounter, influencing what is said, what is silenced, and how knowledge is co-constructed. So in a way, this quote actually very clearly captures the essence of the main argument and the main points I want to make in this presentation today, which is, research is not, it's a relational process. Whenever we are doing research, whether it's a qualitative research or quantitative research, we actually essentially engage with others. And when we engage with others, our identity inherently interacts with the identity of the other people. And that's where, identity, when interacts with others, starts producing its own kind of power dynamics, and it actually shapes the way research is conducted, the way data is collected, and the way data is interpreted. However, what we see in practice generally is that researchers, when working as researchers, we often tend to be so deeply influenced or influenced by or preoccupied with theoretical questions, methodological questions. What is our theory? What are our research questions? How we actually identify the gaps, research gaps, and what methodology use. So we become so kind of a methodologist or theorist in that sense in designing a research project. And as a result of that, sometimes very delicate and intricate issues like power and identities doesn't get much attention. However, the reality is that any research is always and often shaped by and influenced by who we are as a researcher and how we engage with others, that is our research subjects. So this actually also points to the fact that identity and power are always very central elements, and we should actually engage with these two concepts throughout a research project, from a designing stage to research writing and reporting and dissemination stage. There are different theoretical, philosophical views about how knowledge is constructed, what is knowledge. But one of the arguments of methodological philosophy about knowledge construction is that reality is always there. Okay, so we don't actually construct the reality. Reality is there. We try to explore the reality. We try to come closer to the reality by generating new knowledge. So research is a process of generating new knowledge, and essentially this is a socially constructed process. So as a socially constructed process, research facilitates the interactions between the researchers and the research subject, and it is this interaction that creates power dynamics, and this power dynamics is influenced and shaped by who I am as a researcher. Well, in fact, when explaining what is power, what is identity, and what is inclusion, and how it matters for, I'm also going to reflect on my own field work in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Nepal, to give you some real-world example of how it actually influenced data collections and analysis process. And the another thing we should always be mindful when designing a research project is that power relations and power dynamics are always present in the field. That is not just between the relations in the relationship between researchers and research subjects, but also there are always power dynamics that exist even among or between the group of people that you are going to study. Okay, so we need to be really mindful, and being mindful about these power dynamics is one way of ensuring that you are trying to be equitable and take an inclusive approach for our research. Why identity, power, and inclusion matters? The literature suggests different benefits to pay attention to this. And one of the benefits is that if you are mindful of these dynamics and if you have approaches and ways to address this in your research question, it actually influences, in fact, increases trust with the community, with the research subject. Even it improves the quality of data, or if it is not addressed, then it can influence the quality of the data. Inclusion ensures fair representation of people, because a collaborative research is also a collaborative process. So you would want to include the people, in as much as possible way who you are going to study in the field. And being mindful of identity, power, and inclusion helps to maximize the public benefits of the research. If it's a research about policy, or whether it's a scientific research, or whether it's a action research, inclusive research actually increases better outcomes for people. So let's look at these three elements separately, although they are interrelated. What do we mean by power? Let's start from there. Why it matters and how it can actually influence the research process and research outcome. Okay. Before I go ahead, do people have any question as of now? Does anyone want to add anything, or let's make it interactive. So if you want to add anything to what I'm talking about or I have just talked about, you can actually raise your hand by pushing one of these buttons, and I'll stop and let you have your say. But does people have any question as of now?
There is one comment.
Okay.
Could you explain more about what is power here mean?
Yeah. Oh, right. Exactly. This is the next slide. Okay. That's the next slide. Thank you. Yeah. Right. Look, power in a social world or in a political world, it's a contested concept. It's a complex concept, but it's omnipresent. It's everywhere. In simple words, power means someone's ability to have others to do the work with the way you want other people to behave or act, without using force. Okay, for example, if for example, person A is able to make person B to do the work that person A wants he or she to do, then we generally think that person A is more powerful. That's a very simple definitions of power, right? One's ability to influence other people's action, other people's how other people's work, or what you want other people's to do. So power obviously has capacity to influence, and there are different sources of power. It can come from possessing wealth. It can come from being in different kinds of positions. For example, holding an office or being elected in in an office as a public representative. you can actually also get power from military sources and other forms of force, using other forms of forces, right? But here I'm not going to talk about that very political, complex political definitions of power. Here what I'm using the term power is the ability to influence, hold or influence someone's decision. Okay, because at the times in our society, there is a situations where people's decision makings are influenced by others, not necessarily always using force. Sometimes it can be through mobilizing ideology. Sometimes it can be through leadership quality, sometimes through possessing certain positions in an office, etc., etc. So the reality is that when we are in the field, we come across not just the kind of the people we want to interview or we want to work with, but you also have to willingly or unwillingly, you also need to interact with people who can control decision making, who can control mobility, or even what people think, talk, in the community. So there are sometimes these kind of people who control a group of people and can also control the access to the people in the field. In other words, you will encounter some people are more powerful, influential, and they have a better say in the community. Okay, I'm actually going to give you an example from my own field work from 2015-16 in Myanmar. Back then, Moani knows this well. I think where Myanmar had political transition started in 2010, and there was governments elected, who came to power through elections. I think it was in first time it was in 2012. National League of Democracy came to power through by-election. Is that correct, Moani?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and then again they won the election in 2015, and Aung San Suu Kyi became the de facto leader and came to the power. So it was around this time there was a lot of optimism in Myanmar, right? And there was a peace process that was put in place around 2015. And one of the achievements of the peace process in Myanmar back then was that there are a number of ethnic armed organizations which were fighting with the government forces, but they are still fighting. The situations actually has become unfortunately worse than 2015. But in 2014, I think there was a breakthrough in having negotiations with some of these powerful warring factions, ethnic armed groups, and there were 8 armed groups which signed the nationwide ceasefire agreement. So because of the nationwide ceasefire agreement, these armed groups stopped fighting, and there was a dialogue and negotiations that was working towards signing a peace agreement, but it never happened. So it was this time when the nationwide ceasefire agreement was signed, Myanmar actually established ceasefire agreement monitoring groups from national to local level. Not all states, but in Mon states, in San states, in Kachin states, and also Chin state and few other places, there were local ceasefire monitoring groups. So I did a study in 2015-16 to look at how women can actually be part of this ceasefire monitoring group. how they can actually support and what role they can play in implementing the ceasefire agreements at a very, very local level. And this is one of the pictures from Mon states. And the women, girls that I'm talking to in that pictures are local ceasefire monitors. So they actually also were working with different non-government organizations. So the field work was going well. I was an outsider, not from Myanmar. People were relatively open, but I'm going to talk about insider-outsider dilemma in a minute. But then after having like a couple of rounds of interview, I realized that the kind of responses I was getting from the people was pretty much similar. You know, everyone was talking something similar. Things we started repeating, okay? So, okay, excuse me. Started repeating, and then I realized that I talked to, there were like two girls which were very open, very enthusiastic, very much inspired about their work, and they're very proud and passionate about the ceasefire monitoring work and humanitarian work they were doing in the ground. And having conversations with these girls, I realized that actually, even though these women researchers were involved in ceasefire monitoring, there were other people in the community, in their village, or even in their families who they actually had to rely on, you know, to decide where they can go and where they cannot go. Okay, so which means that there were more powerful people who decide what these women, ceasefire monitors and local volunteers could actually monitor about. Because, and this is partly because of the, the power relations between them and the village leaders, community leaders, the male leaders of their families, and much of the relationship between these leaders and the, these ceasefire monitors was determined by the kind of, the gender identity and how these women are generally treated in their communities. So I realized that the leaders who in the literature also often are referred to as gatekeepers, they are actually controlling what kind of informations these these volunteers could or could not share with me as an outsider, as a researchers being present in their communities, right? So this is an example of the unequal power relations between my intended research subject and their relationship with other people in the community who would actually consider themselves more powerful and would control the narratives of these girls, was going to impact on what kind of information I was going to get. And I realized that if I do not engage with these local power brokers or the gatekeepers or the so-called leaders of their communities, I wasn't really going to get the, I was not going to be able to access the right people I wanted to talk to. I was also not going to have access to the right informations and the correct informations that I was looking for, right? I had no idea about this as a researcher until and unless I was present in the community. So to address this kind of power imbalances, I actually had to find someone very quickly in the community, both male and female. I only had one enumerator, research assistant, and local guide who was female, but I also had to find another man to talk to community leaders in the community, to liaise with the community leaders, whereas I rely on my another research assistants to continue engage with this ceasefire monitors. So these kind of power relations can, when you are in the field, you should be really mindful about who you are going to talk to and what kind of power relations these your intended subjects has with the people, other people in the community. Sometimes we probably not able to see that dynamics until and unless we are present in the field. So this is just an example of how existing cultural and gender-based power relations in the society was going to impact the quality of information, the quality of access to the field for my own research. So this is just an example of existing power relations and how it can affect research in the community. But there may be different other kinds of example because power actually exists in many ways, in some communities where I have worked with in South Asia, where actually I had to consult with the local leaders to determine who I would interview and who I would not be able to interview. So that's just one example. There is also another example. I have taken it from a literature, and this is about, conduct. This is the second example I have here on this slide is basically about the power relations between the researchers and the research subject, the direct power relation between researchers and the research subject, okay? For example, in this case, you can think of a group of academic researchers, medical researchers going to a hospital and talking to the patients. Okay, in this case, patients who are admitted in mental health hospitals, mental health wards, or having kind of mental health issues. So in that kind of situations, different forms of power, power relationship exist because oftentimes patients think that the researchers are experts and they know everything. So they kind of leave the final judgment, to the researchers rather than the patients being able to speak about their own experience. One of the other kind of power relations is that even though patients are interviewed in a hospital or in a community, it may be possible that the patients may not be able to see the research findings at all, even though they were part of this research process. Excuse me. So in this case, the relationship between the researchers and the patients may not be fully developed in this case. So, the power that emerges from researchers being seen as an expert and the patient being as non-expert, marginalized subject kind of creates it's a barrier. It creates a kind of a friction. And people may not be open to talk to researchers in this case. So there is a very delicate power dynamics that exist between the researchers and the subject, which can affect what people are going to talk to the researchers about their own mental health issues, for example. These two examples, one from a real world setting from my own fieldwork in Myanmar, and the other one in a kind of a possible scenario often common in the health research, points out that there is existing power relations in the community that can influence research, but also power relation exist between researchers and the research subject. And we should be actually very carefully figure out this kind of power dynamics, and we need to have a clearer strategy about how we can address this so that the research findings will not be influenced. That I leave the second part of the questions towards the end of this session. But I want to ask people if you have any questions as of now. Someone
We
asked,
have a couple of comments here already in the
Yes,
chat.
sure, yeah.
Maybe. It's interactive discussion among the participants.
Yeah.
So the first question is about like, can a data collector become power when he or she trying to guide interviewees to provide some specific data they want? That is, yeah.
Sorry, what again? Say again.
It's about a data collector's role.
Yeah.
Like, do they have a power when she try to guide interviewees to provide some specific data they want?
This is a really
Can they
brilliant question.
manipulate? Like-
Yeah, this question actually kind of is related to the second example I provided. Okay, where of course there is always power. Power is relational. Power is often emerges from the relationship between two or more than two people. Okay, so in that sense, the relationship between data collectors and the interviews, there is an always unspoken, unexpressed, but inevitably present power dynamics. I know, and I used to do this when I was still a learner, when I started doing research. I always wanted my participants, research participants, to say something that I already have in my mind, right? So, when we go to the field, if you go to the field with some kind of preconceived ideas or preconceived expectations from the participants, then an interviewer may force participants towards the direction where you would expect participants to tell the things that you want to hear, right? So yes, the data collector or the researchers, whoever is asking these questions in the field, has that power to navigate, to direct that conversations to that, in a different way. But that's a very wrong strategy. That's what I'm saying here, and if we know in what way you can actually manipulate the informations by using power, how you can actually divert the conversations by using power. If you are aware of this kind of relationship, then you can find ways to address that problem. The next slides that I'm going to talk about is about identity and positionality. So by clarifying and by acknowledging the identity of researchers and also the identity of participants and building a very holistic relationship with the participants and understanding the power relations between the two help you to become very flexible, open in terms of data collections, so that the participants will tell you what they want to tell you. But sometimes if participants think that the researchers is powerful, is dictating the conversations, then in that case, oftentimes participants might end up telling you the things that you like to hear, but not the reality. Okay?
Yep. And Rovati and Radha also make some comments on the, how researchers should be mindful about their influence and bias in this process, sharing their views. And then Myo-kyung, do you want to talk about that? You wrote, just want to share two powerful questions I've learned to unpack issues of the power dynamics. One, who makes decision involved in the decision-making process? Two, who benefits and who misses out? Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So just want to share, because during my master, I also have a course learning about the intersection between powers, politics. So coming from educational backgrounds, these two questions helped me during conducting a leadership inquiry, exploring the issue of equity, educational equity. So these two questions helped me like explore the complexity of the issue by looking further into the issue of power dynamics. For example, when I want to look at the policy, like the policy implementation or policy enactment. So when thinking or putting issues of power dynamics, I can explore further the complexity, the ecologies of the issue, involving also a political aspect, and that helped me understand the nuances of the issue by considering big parties, big stakeholders, such as policies makers, intergovernmental organizations such as OECDs, who really hold big influences in educational policies, both national and international education policies. And also moving on to the questions of who benefits and who misses out, it can help me understand further, like who's really the policies is benefiting and who's the policy is marginalizing, like like giving me ways to explore the issue by also putting into consideration marginalized group of people. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a really good comment. You know, when you're talking about power and then the research topic or research agenda, I mean, sometimes the power of individuals involved in the research, the interest that comes with the power of individuals, and if it is an organizations involved in that process, both individuals and organizations and their power sometimes can actually reshape or determine the research agenda. But then the question is this really the research agenda of the people that you want to bring change about, social change and transformations about? So yes, power is not only relevant when it comes to doing the field work, and this is one of my argument, and one of my main points here is that the power dynamics also determines what kind of research agenda you want to focus on. And this is often happens in policy research and action research and participatory research. Okay, especially if you are doing research with the community in areas of health, education, of course, sanitations, even in agriculture. So who you are actually going to study, and is the topic or the research agenda that you are going to address, is it really something that the people want to address? Is there anyone's power and influence which is actually determining the focus of the research? So these are like some of the big questions we should always be thinking, especially if you are a practitioner, if you are working in government offices or other kinds of think tanks, research institutions. This also happens in the research that is used in evaluations, for example. So yes, what in the literature we call this power is agenda setting. So power not only changes others' behavior, the way other people work, power can also be used to determine which agendas to bring on the table and which agendas to sideline. Okay, so yes, what you said is I totally 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
There's another comment here, yeah?
Two more comments
yes?
from Sophia and Rovdi. Rovdi is adding to her earlier comments. So it's not just about what the researchers say or do, but sometimes the mere existence of the researcher identity can influence the quality of the data. For instance, being a straight man interviewing a woman about intimate partner violence. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And from Sophia, also it's about the construction of the researcher, if that researcher like to know how the research subject responds to the outsiders projecting some sort of power, then the attitudes, identity of the researcher will be correspondingly forged.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's fantastic point. Yeah. And the comment about identity, I think I was going to unpack that a little bit more in my next slides, which I still do, but thank you. It's already points to the next, talking points I have here on my notes. Okay. So there's another comment just came in from Mono.
Yes,
is that right?
from Moon. Yeah. Moon, do you want to talk about it or do you want me to read it out?
Oh yeah, I think in short, I just like one example in our reading. Find that one gentleman, he tried his best like to give an answers to like a topic that the researcher want to study because he want it's a positive, I mean it's a good things that he wants to provide answer, but I think we need to also be clearly or explicitly let participant knows that we are not going to access their knowledge, but just to hear their story, what they view on this topic. Yeah. I think this is resonate with many of us in the field as well.
Excellent. Yeah, good observations, and I totally agree with that. Yeah, thank you. Okay. All right. Look, so these are some of the bullet points I try to summarize when we discuss about power and how it influences quality of fieldwork, quality of research, and its outputs. It's what we discussed is that power certainly influences research agenda, who sets the agenda, who selects the research agenda topic. And this is why, the sessions done by Nicole, I think in week 2, about the puzzle driven research is important. It's not, research agenda not just driven by power relations of those who involved, but truly based on the puzzles that we identify through literature review can help us to minimize the impact of power, for example. And these 3 other points about power imbalances influencing access to informations and data collection, data interpretations, and implementing research findings. These are other examples we just discussed. Now let's talk about identity. Okay. So like power, identity also another important concept, and it enormously impacts on how we conduct, how we design research and how we conduct field work. Although identity and power are interrelated, to make it more clearer to the participants, I just want to unpack it a little further as a separate category here. And then later on, we can think of how it influences power. So yes, in simple words, identity means who you are and how you are being perceived by the research participants in the field. So here you see, identity has actually 2 dimensions, okay, in the first bullet point. What I'm trying to say here is that identity is, first of all, who you are as a person, as a researcher, and it can be influenced by your race, religion, ethnicity, gender, caste, nationality, etc., etc. But then your identity is also relational in the sense that you can also see that other people might see you differently than what you think you are. And this is often happens in the field, and to understand that, I'm going to use this this debate on insider versus outsiders in fieldwork in a minute. And why identity is important is because the kind of identity we carry and we represent in the fieldwork and how it comes up in our interactions with the research subjects can either make or break the trust building process and building the relationship with participants. And it's also at the same time like power, the researcher's identity and how this identity is perceived by the research subjects can also influence the way people talk to us and the kind of information they share with us. Like power, there is another important concept, what we call positionality. Identity and positionality is important. Identity is what you are and what you are being seen as by others, but positionality is being aware of how your identity affects your own research role and how it helps you to reflect on how you're going to interact with the other people. So positionality is about positioning yourself in the field work in relation to your identity with the other people. So even though identity and positionalities are two different concepts, here you can see they are sort of interrelated and they matter for research. For example, let's talk about one's identity. People carry on multiple identity in the field. As a researcher, you can at the same time, if you are doing field work in your own community, you may be the community member, you may belong to certain cultural group, you may belong to certain kind of ethnic groups, and so forth. So actually, in the modern day, it is also said that people's identity, people also carry on multiple identity in a community, in a social setting. But in the research literature, there is a long debate, and it's still very contentious and ongoing debate about whether being an insider or being an outsider is being an insider more beneficial for doing research, or whether outsiders have better advantage in doing research in the field. So basically, insider means a researcher or a research team member who shares common identity, who has common identity with other research subjects. An outsider in this sense is someone who is external to the community or the social and collective identity of the people you are going to engage with in the field work. So the insider-outsider definitions is pretty simple and easy. I want to invite people to see what they think about the advantages and disadvantages of being insider and outsider. Does anyone, let's start from being insider, because a lot of time you do field work within the country, but maybe not necessarily in your own community or the kind of people So within the boundary of a nation states, insider versus outsider dynamics might play out slightly differently. So what people think, do you guys have any experience of working in a community where you are seen as an insider, and what was the advantages that you have? What was that advantageous for you to do the research, or did it prove some, did it come with some sort of barriers? Let's spend another 5 minutes to brainstorm or discuss on that, okay? I have actually 2 other examples from my own research, but I want to keep it for later, and I want to hear your own experience in that sense. So like before, please feel free to type in the chat box.
So Ravati has a question.
Mhm.
I have always been interested in research on toxic masculinity and being man in Cambodia context.
Uh-huh.
But given my identity as a woman, I'm afraid that my identity would not allow me to collect data
Yeah.
through interview or FGD with men. What would be your suggestion for this?
Oh, wow. This is very interesting. Very big questions. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Look, again, to start with, I think I want to see this with both insider versus outsiders debate. Let's bring that debate to your question. So as I said earlier, we carry on multiple identities. So here you are actually talking about your identity based on your gender. So being being your identity as perceived as a woman in the community, you might find it, of course, you in a Cambodian context, and given the gender power relationships and that exist in the society and the kind of culture that exists in relation to gender, it can be certainly not easy field work. But I think I have, in my view, that you can actually adopt a couple of strategies. For example, if you want to do a study on toxic masculinity and experience of men, my first question to you is, are you planning to only going interview men, or are you also planning to have different kinds of respondents in your study? Because the kind of sample size you select is one way to go about it. Okay, that's one. Would you like to comment on that, or you want to come in later to my question? If you want to study, what would be your, who would be your respondents in this case? Would it be like 100% men from different communities, or are you also going to consider interviewing some women, from the same communities or from other areas? Yeah. Will also include women. Yes. Okay. Good point. I mean, I think you could include fairly. You could actually make your sample representative, and so you could actually include some women, and having your identity as a woman. I think you can probably start with interviewing the woman and see what they think about men, right? You can give a try with a couple of people, but then it's also depends on the arts of asking questions. Maybe if you want to ask questions that some of you may find non-threatening, it depends on what kind of questions you are going to ask. So you should really reflect on your questions. Maybe you can peer review your questions and then make it kind of as non-threatening as possible. So your people, when you ask these questions, people should not really feel that they are being threatened by the kind of power relations you are going to talk about, the kind of identity, different identity, the kind of masculinity that you are going to talk about. That's another strategy, the design of the questions. And in my view, the third strategy for you is to find a research assistant who is a man, and you can actually engage with the research assistants to collect data. So it's obviously a research related questions. You may or may not have resources to hire someone to do the interviews for you, but if you think that the main respondents are not being so open with you, they are feeling kind of barriers because of her identity, you can rely on a very good male research assistant or enumerators in the field to be able to help you to collect data. And then the third, if you can also actually think of a mixed method, and you can actually collect the data that you couldn't really collect through interviews by running survey, because people oftentimes find it a bit open to do survey. But again, if you want to do a survey, you should be very careful how you word your research question. Don't ask direct questions which actually challenges their authority, their agency, and sort of things in the community, right? So these are, in my view, some of the strategies that you can apply to do this field work. Okay.
Robert, I have a follow-up question about the quality of data. If we train a male data collector instead of doing ourselves as female to collect the data from men group, like.
But the quality of the data is still acceptable. If we train a male data collector to collect, I mean, of course, I mean, you can definitely maintain the quality. You can definitely maintain the quality of data, integrity of data, while engaging with your data collectors. So it should be possible, in my view.
There's two further comments from Sophia and Sommi.
Yeah.
Do you want to come in and talk or discuss? Sophia, Somni, or?
Sorry. Actually, I just would like to reflect toward what you are talking about related to power of interviewers, and I think that it really needs some time, like what they mentioned and so on. So I try to reflect to the exact what we have been going through. Especially, I am thinking as well. It being the woman to interview men maybe a bit challenging. I used to conduct some interview with male group, but I think that it need to be like what you mentioned, like the art of interviewing and the flexibility of how we really interview in there to get the like quality of data and so on, and also try to share the experience that I'm trying to be flexible, because our some target group, they also like have some limitation to reach some like specific interviewers. For example, like I mentioned, like the gay men, they really don't. Sometimes their setting doesn't really really open up for women to be there. So we have to like switch the role with another interviewer in order to get the quality of data. So this is like I try to reflect. Thank you for giving the opportunity.
Absolutely. Look, this is another important. It reminds me another important considerations here. Okay, there's no one size fit all answer to these questions. You know, you really have to. This is why the understanding identity and power in the field is so important. And this allows you to reflect on your research methodology and readjust your research approach and methodology while you are actually in the field. Okay, you know, for example, in my experience, when I was talking with conflict victim woman in Sri Lanka, northern Sri Lanka, back in 2017, 2018, what I realized is that some conflict victim women were not very comfortable to talk to a foreigner, non-Sri Lankan man coming to interview them, right? Second, everybody has their own unique experience about how conflict affected them, how violence impacted them. So initially, I was talking to a group of 5-7 women in a group as a focus group discussion. Then I realized that talking to them in a group was limiting, in the sense that people do not want to share their experience in front of other people. Okay, because they don't want to share people don't want to tell their stories to everyone, although they would trust me and my research assistant, who was Tamil Sri Lankan from that area. So what happened is that we had to actually minimize the number of focus group discussion and change that focus group discussions into one-to-one conversation. And I was present in some conversations where the women were relatively open and okay to talk to me, but then I was absent in other conversations, which was then continued by my research assistant, who is a local woman researchers from Jaffna, right? So sometimes you have to really think of whether or not you want to do a group interview and whether or not it's going to help you collect the data that you really wanted to collect. Okay, so you need to understand what is people's experience, how identity is actually impacting the relationship between researchers and research subject, and whether or not you need to switch your strategies differently. Okay.
Yeah. And Sophia made a comment on like thinking of the insider and outsider.
Yeah.
So she appreciate like some ethnographers, they try their best
Uh-huh.
to insider learning just by learning the languages and live in the steady research location for years. So their identity may place them as outsider, but they are trying their best with some efforts to blend in as an insider and to create a different position.
Yeah, the whole idea of ethnography often takes, it's a very intensive time consuming research methodology. In the past, anthropologists would spend months, if not years, in the community and really mingle and blend with the local community people, even learn the local language, speak local languages. So in a way, anthropologists try their best to build a kind of a very, very close relationship with the local community they want to study. As I said, by learning the local languages, communicating in local languages over time, living like people exactly right in the community where the field work is done. And this really takes time, okay? Academic research where you have sufficient time and fund to do that may allow you to do that, okay? But in policy research and other kinds of research that you are bound to produce, you are expected to produce report in 3 months, 6 months, or even 1 year, this may not be necessarily possible. And what we're just talking here about, excuse me, anthropologist experience is a case of doing field work outside of your own country. This is like in international field work. That's a very unique scenario. But even in that case, excuse me, anthropologists try to build relationship with the local people, but they cannot really build the identity of the local people. Building the local identity, it may not be simply possible. Excuse me, guys. I'm developing some cough from this morning, so excuse me. So I agree with you, but even in that case, I think in ethnographic case, relationship building is a key, but having the identity of the local people being seen as a local is a very long-term process. Okay. Is there any other comment or question?
That's all, DB, so far.
Thank you. Okay. So I don't want to go in detail about insider outsiders because we touched on that. There are definitely let's look at very quickly the benefits and then the advantages and the disadvantages. Being an insider sometimes helps. It makes it easy for our researchers or research team members to build relationship, trust, rapport with your research subjects, and it can actually help you access the field without any hurdle. Okay, because you know the culture, you even know the people, you know where to go and what informations to collect, and you also have sort of a very good understanding of cultural and contextual realities, so which can further help you to bring that understanding in the data analysis and data interpretation process, and it can give you a solid and accurate understanding of the reality you are studying. So there are lots of advantages, you know. But sometimes there are also ambiguities and disadvantages, because even sometimes even being insiders, you don't know how your identity is being assumed or is being viewed by other. You know, for example, being a Cambodian woman trying to do study on toxic masculinity, you never know how the intended research subjects, which are predominantly men, are see, you know, how do they see you as a researcher, as your identity. And you don't know until and unless you are in the field. So in other words, being insiders doesn't necessarily mean that you have the access to quality data. I was actually thinking to discuss this research I did back in, this is actually my PhD fieldwork, where I studied the experience, how ex-combatants, Maoist ex-combatants, the fighters, how they experienced after they returned to the community at the end of the war, and what was their experience of reintegration back to their families and communities. And you know, these research subject who I interviewed, you know, almost more than 55, 60 of them, they are the kind of people who spend minimum 5 to maximum 7, 8 years in the war. They were disconnected from their families, their communities. They lived in Maoist military barracks, where they even build their own kind of a smaller community, what they call it, the community of war. So they are ex-combatants were used to living together in a commune type of life, supporting each other. And when the Maoist insurgency ended in 2006, they were facilitated, they were supported to go back to the community. And it is at this stage, some of them were, even after the war ended, didn't directly go back to the community. They rented places outside of the, or in the peri-urban areas in different parts of the country, and they still actually lived in a smaller community, because they living in a war family for a long time had really built a very strong bond between these people. So they continue living in a group even after the war ended. So I went to the field and I started talking to them. I spoke their language. Originally I came from the same country where they come from. But even though I thought that I would be an insider in doing a field work, talking to these people, and then the ex-combatants would easily communicate with me, because I can speak language, I can understand where they come from. I even, to a certain extent, say the cultural similarities. However, for the first few months, I find it extremely difficult to build relationship and rapport with these people. So my understanding that I would be accepted as an insider in the field work was wrong, because although I thought that I would be an insider, the ex-combatants initially thought that I'm an outsider because I don't belong to the community of ex-combatants, right? So the whole idea of insider versus outsiders is sometimes it plays out in a bit artificial way. It doesn't really works in a clear-cut manner as a binary. So it is not this versus that. And there are always power imbalances in the field. So it took almost 2 months for me to even, convince the ex-combatants and their leaders to talk to me openly and frankly. They were talking to me, but not really openly, because they had a lot of suspicions about people outside of the community of ex-combatants, for example. So this is one of the challenges I wanted to talk to you. And this is where I realized that the whole idea of outsider versus debate, which is still a very prominent debate in the literatures, sometimes it doesn't really, in reality, it doesn't play out in the way we see it, right? Likewise, in another research, which was in 2019, I was studying, nationalism in Sri Lanka. In my research plan, I wanted to talk to people from different ethnicity and faith background. Okay, so in this case, again, I thought that I'm an outsider, and people we have no hesitations to talk about, because as a foreign researchers in Sri Lanka, I thought that I would be outsiders, and people. It will take some time for people to build relationship and rapport with the research subject. That was my expectations and assumptions, and pretty much I hope that outsiders has limitations to access the informations. But to my surprise, when I started fieldwork, I talked to people from 3 different ethnic and religious backgrounds, both Muslims, Buddhists, especially Buddhist monks, as you can see on this picture here, and also Tamil minorities. But in fact, even if being an outsider, when I talk to people from particular faith group, for example, when I talk to Muslim people, they were pretty much open in the sense that they were talking to someone, foreigner, who they think would bring a new unbiased perspective to understand their issues. And in a similar manner, the Buddhist monk and then the Buddhist leaders that I talked to also had a similar kind of understanding, So although I thought that being an outsider would be a bit challenging, it turned out to be easier than I expected. So again, my conclusion is that the insider versus outsider dynamics is not very clear cut as we see in the literature. So what is a way forward? Do we really care about insider versus outsider dynamics? Yes, we should, but we should not really see it as a binary of this and that. Okay, in reality, we can of course think our identity as insider or outsider, but at the same time, my argument is that we need to really question our positionality, how we position in the field, and take a very reflective approach to how we see the reality and what reality you've been told by your respondents. So taking a very critical reflective approach and taking a very intersectional approach where you actually combine different kinds of identity denominators to interpret or analyze your data is really a helpful strategy. Okay. Right. Finally, talking about inclusion, I want to hear from people what is their understanding of an inclusive research. Okay, let me ask these questions to you. What do you think is an inclusive research? Do you like to type a few words on the chat box, please? What is your understanding of inclusive research? Yeah. I think there's one comment. Is that right, Moani?
Yeah, that's right. And one more
Yeah.
comment coming in as well.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Meaningful stakeholder participation. Okay. I take that as a keyword. Voice. Good. Okay. I think there are already 3 comments, and these are spot on actually. The first one is, sorry, I lost the track, Moani.
Yeah, I can read it out for you, DB.
Sure.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So most comments were about relevant stakeholder, being able to ensure meaningful participation,
Yeah, yeah.
and understanding intersectionality,
Excellent.
and hear as much voice as possible, regardless of their ethnicity, race, religion, gender. And the last comment here, oh no, it still keep coming. Okay, the other comment is again same, include the same voice of include the voice of all relevant beneficiary. And the last comment is about to understand the full picture.
Full pictures of the issue. Excellent. Yes. I agree with everything that has been said here. So I think the point I want to clarify here, because when we talk about inclusion, I think in case of research, we often tend to think inclusion is a way of sampling, okay? And inclusion in terms of participation. Right. But of course, participation, wider participation of stakeholders or research subjects actually enhances inclusivity of your research project. But it's actually more than participation. That's what I want to say, okay? It's not, participation enables people to be part of it. But the question is, whether or not the participation alone is empowering. That is the very important point, okay? The question we really need to ask here is, does participation ensure some kind of empowerment? Does participation, is participation giving voice to the people that you want to be heard in your research? So yes, participation in a minimalist sense relates to inclusion, but in the case of this, a research project, but we must actually see participation as a way of fostering equity, access, and belonging. So it's about hearing the voices of diverse people, diversity of voice, but also through inclusion, true inclusion means that it is empowering, it brings justice, and it brings transformations to the existing and sometimes oppressive or destructive power relations. So it's actually a much more broader category than just participation. That's the point I want to emphasize. For example, if you are doing let's think of this example here. We don't have enough time to do this group work. I want to skip this and do the next one very quickly. But the point I want to make here is that if you want to if you want to do a research project on, the role of inclusive education in high school, then you know, from a very minimalist participatory point of view, you might like to include children and their parents, children who have, you know, special needs, have disabilities, and their parents in the study. But that's just one way of ensuring, you know, participations. But from a inclusion point of view, you actually ensure that, you know, a wider stakeholders, not just interviewed, but, you know, they are taken on board even in terms of identifying issues and, you know, even interpreting the findings, and even you know, writing recommendations and so on and so forth. So in that sense, when you're talking about inclusion, you are really thinking from a holistic point of view and not just from a narrow sense of participations and participation as inclusion. Do people have any question, or you want to add anything from your own experience?
No comment here, TP.
There's one global and national value. There's Sophia says global and national value, and I
Yeah, that was
suppose,
for the previous one.
yeah, I
So,
suppose that was in relation to inclusion, right?
yeah, that's right.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Good. Okay, so the question now, I think we have less than half an hour. The question we have now is, okay, now we know why power is important, why identity is important, why inclusion is important. But the question is, how can we be more strategic and more specific in terms of integrating these ideas into different in different stages of research? I have 3 slides here, but hang on. The first slide is that oftentimes what I see is that, you know, when I talk to this with other researchers and people doing field work, when I talk about power, identity, and inclusion, people often tend to think these terminologies and these concepts at the field work stage. But that's not how it should work. You know, you should actually pay attention to these concepts right at the design stage. For example, by involving participants early in identifying research topics. You can do this by organizing, hosting co-design workshops and informal meetings with participants, research participants, to set priorities. You can co-identify puzzle and research questions. Another way of ensuring, you know, power, identity, and inclusion is thinking in terms of having a research advisory structures where you have people coming from different identity background. This is often happens in academic research, but also policy research. You have advisory committees, which is inclusive and provides guidance to how to integrate inclusion and address power imbalances in research, and of course, in terms of planning equitable data collection process. In the fieldwork stages, we discussed a lot, but the key here is not positioning yourself as a expert power holder, but listening to positioning as a listener and learner with the participants. You can sometimes engage with your peer researchers if your identity is preventing you from accessing certain informations. You can also think of addressing language barrier if you are doing field work overseas, and also trying to conduct field work in as much natural settings as possible, not doing in fancy cafe, big hotels, etc., but right there in the community, doing like what community people do. And also sometimes we need to really pay attention to special needs of our research participants. Some of them have household labor work, some of them have work commitment, childcare, mobility assistance needed, etc., etc. So all of these things can help us to address power imbalances and build better relationships with the communities. And in the writing stage, this is where I think the writing stage is where you actually create evidence-based narratives which informs new knowledge production. So it is at this stage you should actually be very mindful of acknowledging your own positionality, addressing, identifying potential biases, and make it explicitly clearer in the research report, okay? Not taking sides to anyone. If you are doing research in a divided society, and including inclusive and natural languages helps as well. When interpreting the findings, always acknowledging and recognizing multiple perspectives and voices of people from different social groups is another strategy to make your interpretation and analysis more inclusive and address power imbalances as well. And importantly, people feel empowered if you go back to them and share your research findings with them, giving back to the communities, which as researchers we often don't do. We have limitations. We have our own limitations to do that. But in the writing stage, in the writing stage, there are a lot of things you can do. For example, in some research, you can also even give credits with the research subjects. There are occasions when I've seen people even, mentioning the names of the research subjects with due credits in the research reports. That's another way of do that. And of course, consider translating the findings in local language so that the research subjects are aware of what is the outcome of the research they were part of. So these are other strategies to build on. We have like 20 minutes to go. As a group exercise I planned for this session, I'm happy to actually turn this into a brainstorming sessions, because 20 minutes probably not enough for a group discussion. So the question I want to ask you here for this group exercise is, think of a research project that you already have in mind and you have started working on. Do you think like the question of power, identity, and inclusivity matters for your research, and in what way? And how do you want to draft your approach, your strategy, and even mix risk mitigating statements if you think your power, identity, and inclusivity creates some kind of challenges for the research that you are going to conduct. So I invite people to reflect on what I said, what we discussed in this session, and bring that discussions to your own research project, and reflect on how power, identity, and inclusion plays out in your research project. Okay. In particular, I want to hear from people who, if you have in mind a plan to do a quantitative research, I want to hear from people how this is actually going to influence your research, in what way, or whether or not it actually, what we discussed actually matters for your research, and in what way. You don't have to type. Even people you can even just rather than typing, you can instead talk and yeah, share your thoughts. Is anyone thinking of doing a research in education space? Or is anyone already doing a research in education space? Or agriculture? Or health? Political institutions to agency of workers in either conforming or avoiding policies and norms. Oh, okay. Very interesting, Sophia. I think let's talk about Sophia's. Sophia, do you mind if we use your, okay, thinking of doing research on agriculture. Rithia, good. Let's take one more. Do you guys mind to use your research for the, for the discussion for the next 15 minutes? No, good. Okay, excellent. Socioeconomic incentives okay, these are like 3 diverse research projects, but very interesting. Let's start from Sophia's research project, okay? Political institutions aiming to understand the agency of workers. Sophia, can you please clarify when you say political institutions, do you mind to narrow it down? Like which particular institutions do you have in mind? Because political institutions is sort of a general, it can be a general category as well. You don't need to type, you can type or you can also talk, Sophia, if you like to. Okay, environmental management. Yeah, that helps. That narrows down. Okay, no problem. Yeah, that's all right. No problem, Sophia. So you are trying to understand studies institutions responsible for environmental management to understand the agency of workers in either conforming or avoiding policies and norms. Okay. So how do you think power plays out in, let's talk about at least in fieldwork stage. How do you think power can influence your fieldwork? Or do people have any suggestion to Sophia about it? What she probably would need to pay attention to or be mindful of when she's doing field work from the lens of power, identity, and agency? Yeah, local authority or cooperative power over people. Yeah, I think that's what exactly I was thinking, like if you are going to study institutions and also look at the agency of agency of workers, local workers, then I think in your case, the tensions, power imbalances between institutions and then the workers is really going to be very significant. And you will come across these power imbalances very clearly. And you should be aware of what kind of power imbalances exist between the institutions you are going to focus on and the workers that you are going to interview. Excuse me. Sorry. That's probably going to be very significant. Sophia, I mean, when we do this in-person training, we can definitely reflect on this and refine your that's one of the aims, you know, once we do this online training and when we meet in-person training over 3-4 days, we help you to refine your ideas. That's the whole idea here. And I hope from now until you know, the in-person training, you probably have some more thinking around your research topic, your field, but also power, identity, and inclusion. You can give some more thoughts and considerations to do that. Here is a very interesting suggestion, I think, here. The intergenerational leadership, elderly leaders and younger leader dynamics. So Mono, is that your suggestion or comments to Sophia, Mono?
Yeah, I think if the participant would include the leaderships, I think currently we have like the news, younger leader and the older leader, they works together. So I think this power dynamic may also
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, again, still at this stage, the research question and the research objective needs to be fleshed out because, you know, because we know now we know the focus on institutions in relation to environment, but then we still need, Sophia still needs to clarify about the workers. So who are the workers? Are they just workers or also leaders of the institutions or leaders of the workers community? Once these details are worked out, then I think we can better understand the intricate power relation that exists between them, in my view. Right. So I hope the today's session gives you know helps to think through this topic in relation to power and identity, Sophia, because you need to really narrow down some of these words that you have in your mind, the concepts you have in your mind. Nevertheless, what I can say is that in your project, the impact of power is really, really significant. And if you don't address this, then you might end up collecting information that probably doesn't accurately represent the reality on the ground. Okay. I hope that was useful, Sophia. There's another interesting project here, which is, I think this is, who is this? Rithia? Rithia's project, doing a research on agriculture. Rithia, would you like to say something a little bit more about it? Like what sort of, now you don't have to have a final ideas as of now, but can you clarify this a little bit for the rest of the group so that the people may be able to give you some comments or feedback from power, identity, and inclusion lens?
Yeah, yes.
Sure.
Yes, actually, I'm thinking about it as well, whether my research can be part of it or not, because I'm planning to study like the nutrient recycling in cassava crops that mostly should be related to the fieldwork, but the fieldwork with the crop and like the experiment and the laboratory. but I'm not sure whether I can include that the power and inclusive to that parts or not.
So you are going to do some lab tests. Are you also going to do some survey or interviews as well?
From my first thought, it's mostly like do the on-site experiment and the lab test. But
Okay.
it is not finalized yet whether I can include the survey, but still thinking which part that I can include the
Oh yeah,
survey.
look, I
Yes.
mean, okay, here's a slide. I don't think I spent time on this slide, but this is a slide about how power identity inclusion matters in quantitative research or lab-based research. Okay, so for example, I mean, I think in your case, one of the important considerations is which community you want to include in your research, right? And who in the community, okay? Like farmers who have big cassava farm, or farmers who have subsistence, cassava farm, which only generates some kind of subsistence and minimal, livelihood options for their household, all those sort of things. I mean, are you going to select it from particular district where the agriculture is farmers are doing better, or are you going to talk to are you only going to do this field work in one particular community? Who you go and talk to the community, and all those sort of things, right? So I think it still matters, but probably not as much as like who is your contact persons in that community, what kind of informations you are going to get from their people, and how reliable that information is, those sort of things. Okay.
Yes.
So in that sense, I think it only it still matters. And also, importantly, in your case, when you have your findings and when you have your recommendations, what is the impact of research findings to the poor people, middle class people, or cassava traders? How is it going to impact on the relationship between these different kinds of people who are connected in the cassava value chain, for example?
Yes, thank you.
Right, so that's where your findings probably alter the existing relationship in the value chain system, for example. So you can actually think of those kind of dynamics when we thinking from this lens. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right, and I think there was another question about what was that? There was another project.
Yeah.
Socioeconomic incentives for unpaid care work and household level income. Yeah, okay. I think this is another very fantastic project. I'm looking forward to hear more about this project when we meet in-person training. And you already have a research questions. That's fantastic. So would you like to say something in your view, whether or not power identity and inclusion is an important consideration for your project? What do you think? What's your thoughts on that?
There's a few things that I need to consider about, because one of the participant group of the research going to be a stay-at-home father.
Yeah.
Also working parents. So like by that standard, it means like the respondent would be a man. And adopting like what you're saying, like I actually plans to also train like a male data collector to actually doing that. But also at the same time, right now like there's a discussion and considering of how we manage the do no harm in the process of the interview, because we're going to like ask a lot of questions that may trigger people's trauma in the process. So we also trying to provide like a psychological first aid
Yeah.
data collector so that they have that tools in case that happen, and also having the resource of like a referral type of resource
Yeah.
in case things
Absolutely.
happen as well.
Yeah.
It's also the fact that like we need to consider of where the interview should happen, you know, things like that, because it may not be able to happen in the house. It may not be able to happen in like a public space, you know, things like that. So these
Yeah.
are, and we're going to also conduct interview with those like caregivers in the what we call ID poor family, the family who actually holding the ID poor.
Yeah.
So in this case, we also need to be mindful with the socio-economic status
Yeah.
that they are positioning in the community itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are the things that we need to consider.
Excellent. And did you find today's discussion, what we discussed in today's sessions, useful for you to further think about your strategy?
Yeah. It's so I have done some thinkings, but this particular section actually reconfirmed some of, yeah.
Excellent. I'm so yeah, happy to hear that. Look, I think in your case, yeah, I mean, in my view, all three concepts we discussed, you know, power, identity, and inclusion, these are really going to intersect, you know, very significantly in your research, because it includes unpaid caregivers' role. So when it comes to, you know, the relationship between caregivers, and especially unpaid caregivers, then you can assume that there is already power imbalances there, you know, because it's a care work that's not in being paid, and there is also strong gender dimension. So there's a lot of power imbalances that you need to really take into considerations in your research. Look, I mean, you rightly mentioned, and I'm glad you mentioned about do no harm. I do some training on do no harm as well in a broader developmental and peace building context. But I mean, especially in your research, but also for others where relevant, I will try to talk a little bit about that in our in-person training. Doing interview questions in a way that won't do any harm to the existing power dynamics in the community. Okay?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
interesting. Good. That's really interesting. Right. Any other comments or any other thoughts? I think we have almost come to the end of 2 hours time frame. If feel free to ask if you have any questions or any final thoughts before we conclude these sessions. Okay. And with that, I stop here, and now Kim Sans, over to you, please. Oh, I think there's one comment in the chat box. Okay. That was just, yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Over to you, Kim-san.
Yes. Thank you, DB. This is a very intensive discussion.
Yeah.
And thought-provoking as well, because when I do this, I have not really thought about the power play, the power dynamic, in the research. So I think this topic is very helpful for our participants in shaping and sharpening their research, especially research methodology. And yeah, I have no other information to add on, but we are now on online session 6, so we are moving closer to the finish of our online sessions. So I will start to prepare and think about the in-person training, and I will try to keep the participant update on that as soon as possible. I get more clarification and confirmation from the organizers. Yes, thank you everyone for your active participations and attention to these important sessions. I wish everyone a happy weekend.
Thank you. And next
See you
week,
next week.
Nicole and I'll talk about research ethics, but also how to, use AI ethically for doing research. So, AI and ethics, that's another interesting topic for next week. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Have a good weekend. Enjoy your afternoon. See you.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.